Today's session is from Kenny Geyskins, who's going to introduce us to 3D BI. It's a way that we can transform our data into 3D spatial insights within Power BI. It's absolutely fascinating, and I hope you enjoy. Kenny,
Yes,
thank
that's
you
good.
for joining us. We're absolutely thrilled, and I'm looking forward to hearing about 3D BI. So, without any further ado, please let me hand over to Kenny, and I'll stop sharing so that you can let us learn from you. I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to it, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for this opportunity, of course. I have prepared, well, I have a common presentation just to have some kind of an introduction, and then, of course, I'll go hands-on with what 3DBI is. But I'll share my screen again, this one over here, and then normally the presentation. Oh, I need to slide it over here, I guess. And so, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I think I can hide this one. So maybe short, Infomaxis. It's a company that I founded 2019. So the history of the company, it starts a bit of course, with my history. I am a software developer. I have been so since 2003, but of course as a hobbyist. And although being a hobbyist software developer, I studied architecture. So I studied architecture from 2007 to 2012 on the year that I graduated. But software development, even though during my studies, has always been a hobby. And as part of my master's thesis, I created a tool to automate the calculation of energy efficiency of houses based on a 3D model. Because I remember back then, well, one of our courses, one of the things we had to learn was filling in a government provided tool where if you want to have if you want to have it create a new building permit, you need to do a energy efficiency calculation. And this tool allowed you to manually fill in all these surfaces, material usages, the orientation that every wall has, etc., and allowed you to manually fill that in. Now, of course, if you let people fill in something manually, A, it takes a lot of time, and two, of course, people, they unfortunately, but we are people, we make mistakes. So I thought, could I do something and automate that process? So as part of my master's thesis, I created an extension on the 3D modeling tool that's named SketchUp, that allowed me to automatically fetch all the information from the 3D model and fill in this tool. And then by doing so, because it became an automated process, you have this interactive process where you make maybe a window slightly larger, and then you immediately see what the energy efficiency impact is. Now, that was the starting point for me to start as a software developer. And fast forward today, the past 12 years, I've been doing, well, custom software development, mainly for the construction industry. What are the typical tools that I would create? You could divide it into three categories. Or it's a tool to automate the drawing process. For example, here you click on a button and it automatically generates all these pipes, connectors, and parts, etc., based on a few hard lines. So normally you would draw this manually. You would place all these tubes manually, and it takes quite some time. In this case, we automated that workflow by drawing a few hard lines, and immediately it generates based on, of course, some logic that has been programmed into this tool. Another typical aspect of the development that I typically do is once you have a 3D model, getting information out of this 3D model. So in this particular view, what you saw is based on the model that was generated, I generate a Excel file that contains a bill of material.
Mm.
But other types of tools would be, again, to export information and bring, quantities mostly and material usage. Yeah, anything that's that you can distill from a 3D model. Another typical category of tools that I would create is connect with external data sources like Excel files, databases, web services, get that information into the 3D modeling application, and then automatically, for example, do some compliance checks. So maybe you connect with an external web service with all these regulations. You bring in that information in the 3D model, and you immediately can do some compliance checks in the 3D modeling application. Or you connect with external pricing database, etc. Again, for the past 12 years, that's what I've been doing. I think in 2019, I first came across Power BI, and I was like, wow, that's an amazing tool. How quick you can connect to all these data sources, Excel sheets again, databases. So essentially, all the data sources that I was always creating custom connectors for in order to bring that information into the 3D modeling application. I saw that Power BI, well, you can connect out of the box with, I don't know, 100 data sources, and you can create these interactive dashboards. Now, unfortunately for me, I also quickly noticed that in Power BI, you cannot bring in 3D models. Well, that was, of course, what I was always used to do. I was used to connect information, either, well, visualize information from a 3D model or connect with external data sources and use that data to highlight specific elements in a 3D model or colorize elements in a 3D model. And I'll jump a few ones because this is more a common presentation. I'll go immediately to 3DBI. Sorry for that. So being the software developer that I am, I noticed that in Power BI you can create custom visuals, and luckily for me, you can create them using web technology, which was something that I was very used to work with. So I created 3DBI, and here is a quick example of, normally in Power BI you would end with these tables, you would end with these charts, and you can, these 3D modeling applications, they let you export data from the 3D model in CSV file, for example, and then you can bring it in Power BI, and you can use that information to create charts and tables. But one of the aspects that you always miss when you look at, in this case, building information, is the link to the original element where does the data derives from. So if for example, if you do a bill of material and you want to know how much concrete is being poured on the second floor, Power BI can do that, but without a 3D visual, it becomes hard to have the spatial relationship to the elements that are responsible for that information. So the moment that you have a 3D model, it becomes, well, quite clear that if you click on something, then you can see on the 3D model what's the element this piece of information derives from. Now, this is just one example. Or if this is scheduling. For example, scheduling is also planning is also just a piece of information. But if you bring that planning, so saying a task, for example, excavation works or groundworks or construction or demolition, all these tasks have a start date and an end date. So it's a very simple data format. And you can, again, Power BI has these Gantt charts, custom visuals of Gantt charts. You can bring in that information, but the moment that you can link that information to a 3D model again, it becomes more a tool that allows you to verify if your construction schedule is correct, because you could immediately go through time, and the moment that you see, for example, you're pouring concrete on the third floor, but the second floor is not ready yet, then you know that maybe you have made a mistake in your construction schedule. Also, a construction schedule, they are usually, I don't know, 1,000 lines in this Gantt chart, and honestly, only the person that's responsible for this construction schedule knows the ins and outs of it. But again, if you link it to a 3D model, it becomes much easier to communicate as well. Just maybe this one I will skip real quick. Now, again, my background is construction industry. And I think I first launched the first version of 3DBI around 2020 during COVID. And just like everybody else, I had to work from home all the time. My wife, unfortunately, she had to go work at her place, but all the stores, they were closed. So my wife, she ordered quite a lot of things online, and I was always the guy that had to open the door. And it got me thinking, wow, there must be a lot of warehouses in the world where all these goods they pass, and that gave me more or less the idea of maybe the warehousing industry is also a potential industry that could benefit a lot from having the ability of seeing the huge amount of information that they have being linked to a 3D model. So instead of, in Power BI, if you could create a query that calculates for you where all my the locations that are empty or filled, or all the locations that have been untouched for 6 months, Power BI can calculate that already for you. And the warehousing industry is calculating it in Power BI, but they usually end up with, for example, a table that says, okay, you have these 100 locations that have not been touched for at least 6 months. But by linking it to a 3D model, it becomes immediately more clear. Now, this visual over here is slightly different. This is displaying, for example, we have in your warehouse, you have X amounts of rows. Of course, this is a mocked warehouse, and you have data that says on this particular day there was this amount of goods of this type installed in this row. And on the next day, either the quantity has changed or the type of product has changed. Now, in the end, it doesn't really matter for 3D BI. You can bring all the information, and as long as you have one matching identifier between your warehouse information and the 3D model, you can let Power BI control which individual elements in the visual will become visible and with which color. So I'll just go quick forward. So here again, data changes over time. The next day, there are possibly less or more products being stored in a row. And yeah, you can go through time in this particular case and see in 3D what the status of your warehouse should be. And there are quite more use cases. I think I need to change a bit the quality of this one. In this case, for example, retail management or office spaces, again, you can manage all of that in Power BI, but you will end up with charts and tables. And I think that if you could see immediately, hey, I'm very interested in how much these are a bit annoying. I'm very interested in seeing immediately where all the office spaces located and how much of them are still for rent, how much of them are for sale, who's the tenant, when is a specific contract ending. Again, all these questions, Power BI can answer those questions, but by linking it to a 3D model, I think it becomes much easier to communicate. Here is a typical warehouse where you have pallets of a specific supplier, a specific product. You have product orders, for example, how much of these locations are being touched in a specific day. Again, Power BI can calculate all of that for you. But yeah, I'm going to say at the same time quite a few times, but it becomes more easy to communicate once you have all of that information linked to a 3D model. And yeah, there are, in this case, a port. Now, in this case, you don't have pallets, but you have containers, and these containers, they come from somewhere, they go to somewhere, and you can link all that info with that model. And yeah, there are a ton more use cases that I can think of, but I haven't really prepared this meetup. But I think maybe just a quick hands-on to how do you get started with this? Maybe that will be something interesting to show now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So I can just close this one. So these 3D models, of course, they need to be created somewhere, and because every 3D context is unique. And being a SketchUp extension developer, I thought, well, let's create a SketchUp extension. Now, SketchUp is, as far as I think, is still the easiest to use 3D modeling application. Quite quickly, you can draw a shape, you can extrude it, you can, I'll just make something very, very stupid, but you can create shapes real quickly, and it doesn't really matter what you want to create. Again, I think it's the easiest to use 3D modeling application. So I thought, let's start with creating an extension on SketchUp, where SketchUp serves, of course, as a creational tool for those 3D models. And then from there, we export the model and all the information that we know that we can distill from the 3D model uh, into a format that's readable for Power BI. And then on the other side, we have Power BI with our custom visual that's able to load in that information and to visualize it. So I'll maybe quickly, how would you typically go? So now I uninstalled the extension, so I would first go and need to install the extension. Just like Power BI, you have app source. SketchUp has SketchUp extension warehouse. So the tool is twofold. We have this part that runs on SketchUp. That part is hosted on SketchUp extension warehouse. And I would go and install it right away because I'm very much starting from scratch just to show you the entire workflow.
Just a quick question,
Yes,
Kenny. Is SketchUp a paid or a free tool?
SketchUp is paid. Yeah.
Paid.
SketchUp also has a free counterpart, but that's online only, and extensions can only be installed on SketchUp Pro. But the price is very, very reasonable. I don't know about by heart, but I think it's 300 euros a year. Not
Okay.
sure entirely. So I'll go and install our custom extension, which is also named 3DBI on this side. And once you have that installed, it basically only has one toolbar. Yep, it comes with the tool itself, also has a trial period. So I'll just go and activate my trial. Hopefully, yeah, that works. Okay. So I'm going to close this dialog again because of course, I first would need to create a model, and I'm going to create a very simple model, not representing something real, but just to show you how it works. Now in SketchUp, I already displayed you can draw shapes, right? So and a shape on itself is a bunch of lines and faces, and you can, if you select all of these, you can create a component. Now a component would be something that would represent a physical object. Now in this case, a box. And I'm going to duplicate this box a few times. No, just 3 times. And one of the things that's important once if you have a 3D model that's representing something that you have as a business object in your, for example, in your warehouse management system or in basically any other kind of process you might have, you need to make sure that you have a matching identifier between the 3D object and your table. So for example, in this case, let's imagine we have data about these 3 boxes, let's say, and one of the boxes should the identifier would be 001, the other 002, 003. So you need to assign these identifiers to these boxes. So in SketchUp, we would use the instance name for that. So again, I have these 3 boxes. I'm going to name them just 001, 001, 002, and 003. And maybe something that I would want to do is to make a bit of variation so that one box is slightly different in size than the other. It's going to help me later on in this process when I would like to colorize things by for example, volume, and then make this one maybe slightly higher. So now I have 3 boxes against not really representing something, but the process is always the same. You draw in SketchUp an abstract representation of the reality that you want to create, being your warehouse, being your building, being basically anything. So you draw the shapes, you assign the correct identifiers to it, and then from there you can launch 3DBI, the export dialog. And I'll go and say that as an ID, I want to use the instance name. So those are the names that I just assigned to these 3 individual boxes, again being 001, 002, 003. And then I'll just go and hit. In this case, I also am going to generate a JSON file containing data of this model. Reason is, in this demo, I don't have a database or an Excel file that contains interesting information fields about objects named 001, 002, 003. So I will create a data file that contains some model information of this model, which I can use in my next step in Power BI. After that, I will show you a few prepared examples where we connect with Excel files and for the data, but just to give you a glimpse of how
This is, yeah,
process.
really useful. Thank you.
So I'll go and export this one, and I'll place it. I have created on my desktop, I think, a folder. So the tool is asking me the name, and I'll just name it model, and so this will then generate a model.3dbi file. The 3dbi file is what contains the geometry. It's over here, so on my desktop. So I've created a 3dbi file, and again, also this JSON file, which contains information. So again, the 3dbi file contains all the geometry linked with the identifier, and then this file contains some very basic information about this model. And as you can see, it states that it has exported 3 objects. Actually, from there, I can now just open Power BI from scratch. And as you know, when you share your screen, it might take a little while.
Oh, it's really appreciate you showing us from scratch, because those people that are interested in design will be able to have a go themselves, which is brilliant.
Exactly. So I'll start with a blank report, and I will first fetch the data from the file that I just generated, the JSON file, being again on my desktop. And normally you would connect to your data source containing some real information about your, if you are responsible for retail or office spaces, you would connect to a file or a database that contains who is renting which space at which time, or if you have a warehouse, where is every product located. But again, I don't have a prepared file, so I'll go with the data that I just exported from SketchUp. And again, it's just these 3 rows, and it says a few typical information fields about 3D models being, for example, the following. And I'm very happy, I'm very satisfied with this. So I'll say this is a decimal number, and I'll just leave it as it is. Again, the reason I need this file is because I need at least some data set containing the exact identifiers, so I can later on use that with the 3dbi visual. I'll go from here and, as always, creating a very basic table in here to show some data fields. Again, maybe the ID and the volume. Your reports would be much beautiful, much more interesting. But again, I'm going real quick. And now the second part is, once you have exported your 3dbi file, once you have created your representation of your abstract representation of your reality, the last step that you need to do is, visualize it in Power BI. And as already stated, I think the 3dbi visual is available on AppSource, so you can go to get more visuals, search for 3dbi. As you can see, it's also Power BI certified. And from there, I can just add it and place some instances of it on my dashboard, on my report, I'm sorry. First thing that you need to do is link this matching column with your identifiers. In this case, my 3dbi model ID column with the object identifiers. And then the last step is to insert the 3dbi model, which is this one over here. And then I have a 3D model in Power BI. Some things you'll notice. So this cardboard placeholder, this cardboard figure is also being exported, simply because it's also part of my model. And what's interesting about this one is that I have not assigned an identifier, an instance name to it, which means that for 3dbi, this geometry is now treated as static contextual geometry. This is geometry that is not interactive. Let me show you what I mean with that. All the other, maybe I'll first do something real quick. I'll stop with the auto fit functionality. So these three boxes are, you can click on them. And then just like any regular visual, for example, a bar chart, if you click on a bar chart on a bar, Power BI will filter down your entire dashboard to only display information that's related to it. So the same goes up for 3D BI. You click on a particular geometry in that model, and of course, in this case, my very simple table will only display information that's related to this. Now, this geometry, which I have not assigned an identifier to in SketchUp, will become always visible. And that helps in case if you're doing a warehouse model, or again with these retail spaces, etc., to have a bit of context that's just there to help you with a visual representation, essentially. And in warehousing, that would typically be the walls of your warehouse, but also the racks. But yeah, and also the other way around, of course, if you click on something in one visual, the 3D BI visual will only display the related objects plus all the static geometry. Now these are all white because in SketchUp they're also white. If I would have assigned, well, maybe I could quickly assign a material to it. Although, yeah, I could, but maybe it doesn't really matter. But I could make this one green, blue, and black, and I'll quickly export it again. And then in Power BI, I would go again and insert the model. And now these have these default colors. But of course, having a default color is not really useful. Typically, you want to have a color based on something that Power BI allows you to. And you could colorize. Do I have something like a... Yeah, I could first colorize maybe just by its ID. Yeah, maybe not really useful for this type of model, but the moment that you do so, you can control the color here in these formatting options. So if you would have something again like space type being office, retail, circulation, etc., and you have those data fields in Power BI, you could bring you could assign colors based on that.
I've got a question. Yeah, yes. This is really interesting. Can we import digital drawings into SketchUp and then use 3D BI extension to assign IDs on it?
Yes. So I have had users asking me to, for example, bring in AutoCAD drawings representing mine shafts, and you can bring in all these. Well, you can import various 3D formats in SketchUp, and then using the same workflow as I did, you could assign identifiers directly in SketchUp to them.
That was exactly it. That was the question. AutoCAD standard extensions. Yep. God, this gives so much potential, doesn't it? Sorry, I'll keep quiet and let you carry on.
No worries. So here I colored by a specific field, but of course you can also just color. You can use conditional formatting. You still need to apply some thing to it. Yeah, I'll go with. Oh, yeah, this is a pop-up. I'm using a trial extension, trial license, so it will sometimes pop up this message, which will go away if I made it so that it takes sometimes a few annoying seconds just to make sure that any. You can also use conditional formatting. So, for example, in this case, let's use a gradient based on the volume. Again, I don't have really useful business-specific data in here, but of course, you could use any decimal column that you might have about your business object.
And is it the other question was, do you have to use SketchUp? Is there another way to generate the 3D BI file without having to pay the fee for SketchUp?
Currently, we have an extension for SketchUp. We have an extension for Autodesk Revit. And we also have a tool that allows you to convert IFC files into the 3D BI format. But we are also working on, so this version over here already also allows you to load in DAE files, which is more like an open 3D format, collada files. So in the visual, you can also load in collada files, and we are bringing more open 3D formats into the 3D BI visual.
Okay, that makes sense.
So then you can use other drawing tools that are capable of creating these files and import them directly into the 3D BI visual.
Okay, I'll stop now.
And so this is basically the getting started on how, of course there are maybe some options that I can talk about. The viewer, you could specify if you want shadows, yes or not. It might add some depth to it. You can control the opacity of your what we call ghosted out objects. So those are typically the objects that fall out of your current query. Based because I clicked on this one, this is now my current selected object, and these other two, they are now ghosted out. You can control the opacity of it. So I could say one is being completely opaque, still grayed out, but completely opaque, or maybe completely hidden by making ghosting 0. I could specify if I want edges or not. Ghost edges, although I remember having added this feature, but I don't know why that should be useful. Contextual edges, so if you want to have edges on your contextual geometry, you can control a bit the light intensity to make it slightly darker or lighter. But we think 3.5 is great. Display fog. Fog is, if you zoom out, it becomes a bit, again, it adds some depth to your model. Render double-sided, that might be an interesting one, because although this demo I was displaying 3D, but of course you could also use it as a 2D drawing tool where you create specific zones, and you don't need to, what SketchUp calls push-pull them. I could also create 2D shapes, and again, let me quickly maybe edit them. Maybe something smaller over here, and maybe this one slightly bigger again. And I'll go again with the instance names that are the same, so my data matches up a bit. And then 003. And if I would export this now, and insert my model again, I'll also need to refresh my data because of course now my volume is always 0 because I don't have a 3D model. But you could, I should have removed this cardboard figure, but you could also make the camera completely viewed from the top, and then you can lock, for example, rotation, and from then it suddenly becomes more like a 2D tool. So you can, in SketchUp or little secret, we are also going to bring SVG importing into 3D BI, so that we hope to be able to also better support 2D file formats. And then you lock, although it's still a 3D model viewer, you lock the camera from the top, and suddenly it becomes a 2D tool where you could link in 2D plans. Again, 2D shapes. The workflow would be the same. It has a few options, and I'm pretty sure that there are other options that might be useful as well. But what I was saying, render double-sided. As you can see, 2D things for a computer, in order to render something, in the end, for the computer, these are all triangles, and a triangle has a front side and a back side. And if you have 2D shapes, as you can see, this cardboard figure is 2D, but also this floor, suddenly I can see through it, because the computer always tries to, for memory optimizations, etc. It only likes to render one side, but you can render double-sided, and then it makes it easier to work with 2D shapes if you have these render double-sided option turned on. Camera field of view.
There's a quick question. There's lots of discussion about speed and rendering and palettes and etc. going on in the chat. So Paul's jumping in to ask some of the questions. Someone was asking about Fusion 360. Can you use Fusion 360 in?
Not directly, no.
Not
But I
directly.
could I could imagine Fusion 360 being able to export in more common Open 3D formats, and then being able to load that into the
Okay, I'll stop.
3D.
Yeah, I'll let you go on.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was going to answer the question about performance. I wanted to
Yes.
show
Ah, brilliant. Yeah.
a warehouse with, I think, 30,000 locations. I need to quickly find it.
Yeah, Paul was just saying that he could render 80,000 pallets in a warehouse, no problem.
Yeah, if you
So,
keep geometry as abstract as possible, Power BI remains a dashboarding tool, and I've seen 3D models with high complex models where even the screws they were modeled, and a screw, although being physically very small, could be memory intensive because again, geometry is made out of triangles, and if you have a complex round shaped geometry, it's made out of a huge amount of triangles. You can better have honestly 80,000 rectangular boxes
yeah.
than a few of those complex geometries. Again, I'm going to search for the 30.
Meshing the shape is what we're being chatting about in the chat.
Yes. 30K palette locations. I got it over here. I'll bring it on my screen here. So here I have. Not sure if the screen sharing goes well, but I see no lag whatsoever, and I can just turn around and I can click. Now maybe the first time it goes a bit slower to highlight something, but in this case I've highlighted these 3,485 boxes. Now I will highlight 3,080 more other boxes. Highlight everything again, and yeah, you can go
That's
well enough.
amazing.
But there are a few.
Very impressive.
But there are a few things which you need to uh, take care about. In SketchUp, you can bring in fairly complex models of, I don't know, construction cranes or even complex racking systems. And the moment that you bring in a lot of those geometries, the performance will drop. But you always need to consider, if is it worth for dashboarding to have a very complex model? In the end, it's meant to have quick insights. So also my palettes, they are, of course, maybe even the size is a bit but it doesn't really matter again for dashboarding if the complexity of the geometry. So a good rule of thumb is keep things as abstract as possible. Also, these shelves in the end, these are just a few faces so that it becomes recognizable that these are shelves, but they don't represent the actual shelf. We're not going to create something with these models. It serves as a abstract representation.
Yeah.
Um, maybe already some other questions that I have not seen in the chat, but I'm that I could answer.
Yeah. Paul's going through answering them as they're chatting about it. So
Okay. Now on the website, 3D for SketchUp, we have quite some interesting tutorials that go about how you can create these. Now, for example, this one, and this one. I'll just open them one by one. So it's very straightforward how you can create them, but they all also have the example dashboard. Again, this is a warehouse model, a very simple warehouse model, but it greatly illustrates the possibilities where you can bring in information about your products, who's the supplier, what's the product type, and of course, I'm very sure that you are used to much more beautiful Power BI reports, and I don't consider myself a professional Power BI designer nor a Power BI developer. I know a lot about this 3D visual. I know a lot of the construction industry, but I have to admit that my dashboards, they are by far the best looking ones. But it they also just to give you the
Illustrate.
idea of
Yeah,
yeah what
definitely.
what's possible. The other way around, so you notice that I click on something that it only illustrates every object that has a relationship to, in this case, I think the name of a supplier or maybe the
We
product.
have two people in the chat that are very interested for their work.
Okay. The other possibility is I already illustrated you can click on one of these objects or you can hold control and then you can select a few of those and then yeah, as you can see it will illustrate that the other way around it, the selection. Yeah. Um, so this again, this is warehousing. The tutorial is on our website. This is for the construction industry primarily. So this model, it came out of SketchUp, just like in the beginning of this meetup. I created a very simple model. Now this is something more representing something. It also has attached a few more classifications to it, so that we know in Power BI that something is a column or a footing or a slab.
Yeah.
And then we link this dashboard with, again, a very simple Excel file that contains unit prices. For example, this concrete in situ, it has this unit price. And then if you, of course, you combine both and you create a calculated column, you suddenly have a price for a specific element.
Question, how often does it get refreshed? Suppose one, I don't know actually.
It depends on,
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
what gets refreshed.
I was going to say you must build the model in SketchUp and then import it in, so the model remains static, and then it's the data that's refreshed. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So let's maybe say also for warehousing. Now, yeah, warehouses they also do change over time, but it's of course the data that changes continuously.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's just and the data part of things is that's just Power BI. So
Yeah.
as much as you can refresh your data in Power BI, it will refresh. The geometry is inserted directly in the visual. So remember back here, I did press this insert model button. Then the 3DBI file is injected directly in the visual.
Yeah.
And it's stored in your Power BI report.
Yeah. And if there's nothing there, then it would be filtered and it wouldn't show. You know, if you were filling up boxes or something, then you would make it blank or translucent or something. So it would only show if they were depending upon the condition.
Yep.
Okay, I understand.
And then this last, I think, interesting one is for project management. So here are a few of these items that I can click on. These are so what we call my business objects. Those are the ones that I have assigned an instance name in SketchUp, and all the rest it remains always visible because I think yeah, in SketchUp we have not assigned an identifier, and it serves to give us a bit of more context to our project. Now you don't need to click on neighboring buildings. You don't really need to have information assigned to it. It's just there for context. In this case, what can I do here? Well, I could click on all the offices or all circulation. I can also use this parameter to change my color by field to show everything for rent or not, or for sale, or yeah, you possibly have more interesting data fields. Again, if you have tenants, if you have issues, if you have contracts that, for example, you create a calculate column that gives you a status to every contract that says, okay, this one is going to be to end between today and 2 months from now. You could use that information to quickly highlight everything where the contract has to be renewed in a specific time frame. Or one of the use cases that I still maybe you know something that is a hotel responsible person, but I would like to create a dashboard where I create in an abstract way all the rooms in a hotel. And then we link in customer feedback, this 1 to 5 stars ratings, and we link that together with the 3D model, and immediately can see all the 5-star rated rooms and all the lower rated rooms in an interactive dashboard. So I think
Oh yeah.
I think there is in the end, I think the goal of 3D BI is to be able to link any type of information with any type of 3D model, as long as, of course, the data that you have goes about a physical object in a physical group of objects. And again, being pallets in a warehouse or rooms in a building or whatnot.
Oh, it's fascinating. You just really makes your mind blow as to what the possibilities are. One of my customers is a golf and country club with hotel facilities, and just think, oh,
Yeah. Well, always happy to give more information if needed. I know that many Power BI users, for them 3D modeling is fairly new. Or well, they are maybe not used to do 3D modeling, but again, I talk a lot about the warehousing industry, and I've helped warehouse managers in the past to based on it can be just sketched, an abstract blueprint together with a few pictures just for me to help me getting to know the shape of everything. But we've done projects in the past where we made a 3D model for them, and then of course they were already used to working with Power BI, and we provided a plug and play solution in the end for them, where they just bring in the 3D model that we create for them, and then they link it together with their information.
With their own data, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that is brilliant. A couple of pointers. Titanic. It would be quite interesting to have. I mean, no commercial use at all, possibly now, but to have the Titanic, and there's the Titanic data set where it says whether people survived, they floated, and then you could have that compared to where they were in the in the ship, and then
in the sections.
Yeah. I mean, no, bottom, not going to do very well. Yeah, spoiler, it did sink already, Fernando. So just interesting, because that data set's out there and very, very, well, I guess most people know the data set. A question from Eric. Is it possible to change the size of a shape based on a Power BI value? He's thinking of filling up a silo or a tank.
No. With 3D BI, essentially the only thing it does is it either shows or hides elements, and you can colorize them. So the geometry itself is static. We've done a few. If you want to make the shape change in size, it becomes more complex to create a generic tool. What we've done, I think I can show a quick demo of. Now, this is not dynamically changing the shape of it. I made an experiment with a robotic arm, and again, not changing the shape, but it's changing the orientation of everything. So this is it's a silly demo, to be honest. But at a specific point in time, you have a recording of a sensor that says this joint or shaft joint, let's say. Actually, it's servo. Has a specific orientation. Now you can go to a specific day and time, and then if I click on it, you can the orientation, the rotation of all the objects changes to it. So 3D BI on its own cannot change shape, but if due to being it a generic tool that needs to be useful for many use cases, but if you have a specific need, of course, for something that moves or something that changes its shape, we can always help in creating something custom for that.
But I was just asking about the pricing. So
pricing.
Just put in the licensing in the chat for everyone so they can see the pricing.
Okay. It's also it's listed on essentially what you pay for if you work with 3D BI files. You pay for the creational part.
Yeah.
So the tool that you install in SketchUp. As I mentioned, we're also going to support open file formats, open 3D formats, and then for that part, you would need a license from AppSource. So if you work with 3D BI files, you would need a license for the creational tool.
Yeah.
And then you generate 3D BI files, and the 3D BI visual can load those in out of the box. Later, hopefully in a few weeks, but We also do well. We still do a lot of custom development. So we work on custom development, and then we also work on 3D BI at the same time. So I don't have a fixed schedule for it, but later this year we will support more 3D formats so that you don't need this 3D BI for SketchUp part. Then you would need a app source license, but all information is there on app source.
And someone said they saw something like this in an Unreal Engine. Would it be possible to walk in the warehouse somehow in the future?
Yeah, I've created a proof of concept where I was able to bring. I cannot display it right now because that would take me too much time to set it up.
Yeah.
But where I was able to link to show a live Power BI dashboard in Unreal Engine, and then let the Power BI dashboard control color and visibility of objects in that game in the end. But shoot, if I would have known that this question would come, I would have prepared something real quick. But yeah.
Don't worry, you can always come back, or you can join us
Okay.
for 5-10 minutes and just show us. So yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not. I will not be able to do it between now and a few minutes.
They're all cursing my yoga now. That's absolutely fascinating.
Thank you. Maybe I can see the chat as well, so I can place it on my other screen. Yeah, okay.
Any questions for Kenny? Kenny, this is amazing. I'd seen the 2D and I saw the SVG a couple of years ago, but it's just blowing my brain really, just of the possibilities.
Well, it literally adds another dimension to it.
Yeah. There's a question: do you have customers, users from the rail industry?
Not that I am aware of. It is possible that there are users using it in that industry, but not that I'm aware of. I have not had personal questions from users using it for that. No.
So I'm being told off. Someone posted a question at the beginning which got blatantly ignored. Fernando, I'm doing my best. My best. Tell me, what was your question? Simon says, are there new developments in the pipeline for this extension?
For the 3D BI visual, yes, we work on supporting more 3D formats. For the SketchUp extension, right now, we have internally a few developments ready that would help in creating specifically warehouse models to make it easier to add 3D text to the model, etc. All these things that you would, that take quite a little while time in SketchUp. We just released a new version of 3D BI for Revit, but that's not so much 3D related, but we export more information now from Revit so that you can bring more information into Power BI. So we are continuously working on different parts of the tool chain. And of course, performance is a ever demanding question. And yeah, but yeah,
this was his question. Obsolete slow movement. I thought we'd covered it, Fernando, when we were talking about meshing the shapes together to improve performance.
The real thing is try to keep the geometries as abstract as possible. And then again, I think myself, I have created also warehouses with 80,000 locations or so, and it just works. And this one over here with 30,000. You know what I will do is, let's see, embed report website published to the web. It's public, so I can even copy paste it here in the chat, and then
people can have a look.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So my question for me, what's the most exciting visual or design that you've created and seen put into production?
Myself, it's as I said, I already helped a few warehouse managers in the past with bringing their actual warehouse into 3D BI, and then of course, maybe I was a bit excited about it because I it's not my background warehousing, so I was fascinated by how many different bin locations that there are. You have these long goods, you have cable rolls, you have conveyors with specific information, you have zones.
Yeah.
So, but maybe not because of the 3D was so fascinating. I have to admit the most fascinating 3Ds that I have created was when I was a student in architecture. But to get to know the warehousing industry a bit more and learning about what KPIs they work with, what are the questions they have, and then what are the questions that they fail to communicate with their management, and thanks to combining the answers that they already had in tables with a 3D model, that yeah amazed me, and of course the size of the amount of information that they have.
Yeah. I guess the architecture at college will be the sort of the art of the possible and what you can do, but then understanding how you can use your skills to answer business questions and the impact that that has upon the business is another really interesting part.
Yeah.
That's the bit I always love, understanding more about businesses and how you can help and support them.
Yeah.
So, to use your passion for your 3DBI. Oh, it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Any last questions for Kenny? Claps, hearts. I think you've all. I mean, the chat whilst you were presenting was just bang, 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 chopping. Discussions, talking about possibilities and helping. So there's a lot of thanks for the presentation. Did you want to just drop your website link in the chat, Kenny, and then people can, because I think there are a few people are thinking of this as a possibility for their commercial parts of their. Brilliant. Great.
So although the name of the company nowadays is Informaxis, it used to be named KG Dev, but that was too personal. So, but the website URL it's still is KG Dev.
Okay, perfect. And then what I will do, everybody, is I'll post this to YouTube and I'll send you the link as well, Kenny, so that you can access it. And a huge thank you to Paul for persuading you to come and chat to us.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. Any last questions before I let Kenny go? No, there's a thank you, and definitely the rail industry can benefit from this. Okay. Yeah, see, now I've got a vision of a train and then all the seats, filling up, because they're always asking you and you can plot it and everything. Yep. So anything else? That's it? Yes, that's Takimi saying. So brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Kenny. I really found that fascinating. I hadn't seen anything. So no, it's brilliant. And thank you everyone for coming. I'll stop recording now. Go and transcribe, stop recording. Stop. So yes, if